Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. Before we get going on tonight's agenda, on behalf of Council, I want to say a few words about an occurrence that happened last Monday, February 16th. Actually, during our Council meeting, an apartment building not far from City Hall, 72 units on Glen at about Pacific, was on fire, and the fire department therefore responded very strongly, along with police and our emergency social services program, city crews, utility crews, in order to deal with a fire that became very devastating for the residents of that building. About more than 100 residents were displaced from the 72 units in the building. But I want to echo the comments I've heard from so many members of our community, so many businesses, so many onlookers, so many charities, and every member of Council that were absolutely ecstatic with the response of our community. Our community rallied strongly in the days that followed, that night as well, but in the days that followed, we had hundreds of donors and volunteers coming together to try to alleviate the suffering and alleviate the challenges that this fire had caused to these residents. I don't want to single out, I'm reluctant to single out, but I do want to acknowledge Eagle Ridge United Church, for example, who opened their doors to the emergency response. Kerry Movers, who actually perhaps were the catalyst that started it all, a moving company that has done this before. CKNW's Drex Live, who came out and did a show from the United Church. So many members of the public, members of Council, members of city staff, off-duty firefighters, other churches and service clubs and groups that donated, raised money, raised goods, and really, I think, showed the kind of community spirit that Coquitlam has. All of us wish the very best to these residents who were affected. No human lives were lost. We did lose the lives of some pets, and that is tragic, but the fire could have been much worse in so many ways, and so today we're thankful, we're appreciative of those who responded so strongly, and we're gratified with the collective response from the citizens of Coquitlam, its businesses, its groups. Thank you. I know there are some council members that have been deeply involved in this process. It's actually not a city process, but I also want to thank them and thank all of the volunteers that have rallied to this cause. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Item 1 are minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, February 16th. The recommendation is that council approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next two items relate to this evening's public hearing. Item 2 is City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4531/2015 for a proposed subdivision and special park at 3500 Highland Drive. The recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4531.
Moved by Councillor Marsden, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3, City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4539/2015 for a proposed subdivision at 3416 Roxton Avenue. The recommendation is that Council give second and third readings to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4539.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Next two items are bylaws for final adoption. Item 4, fourth and final reading of City of Coquitlam Highway Dedication Cancellation Bylaw number 4543/2015. Recommendation is that Council give fourth and final reading to Bylaw 4543/2015.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Towner. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Zerillo is opposed. The motion carries.
Item 5, fourth and final reading of Development Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 4534, 2015. Recommendations that Council give fourth and final reading to Development Procedures Amendment Bylaw number 4534.
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Moving on to reports of staff. Item 6 is report of General Manager Planning and Development regarding consideration of fourth and final reading of Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4484, 2014, and development permit authorization for a local commercial development at 1649 and 1665 Como Lake Avenue. Recommendation is that Council 1 give fourth and final reading to Bylaw number 4484, 2014. Give fourth and final reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4484, 2014. Whoops, sorry. Approve signing and sealing a development permit, and that the Mayor and City Clerk be authorized to execute the permit on behalf of the City, and authorize the Mayor and City Clerk to execute a good neighbor agreement on behalf of the City.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, second by Councillor Marsden. Councillor Wilson.
Oh, thanks. I just had some questions about this. I know initially we were expecting that traffic would be able to go through the Chevron gas station. But now that potentially it can't, is there any concern that people will be turning on to the north side of Poirier, pull into people's driveways, to turn around, to come back through so they can make a right turn in? People in that area are already frustrated because the road's quite narrow, there's parking issues. So that was one concern I had. The other one was just access into the garbage recycling area. I think, actually no, not so much that, but it was more just the issue of the turning around on Poirier. And then the other question I had was just the small parking stalls along the north side of the parking lot. You know, we've had a long discussion about the parking at Como Lake Village Mall and how people don't recognize the labels and that sort of thing. So I could see, you know, large trucks potentially pull into those and you know, blocking some of the traffic. Obviously, you've thought of all of those things and you're still okay with it. I'm just wondering if you could explain a little bit.
Your Worship, I'll provide a few comments from my perspective, and if Carl or Erica want to chime in, they work more directly with the file and the application. In terms of the access, yes, that's it has been a challenge. It was explored with Chevron to see if they'd be interested in enabling that, you know, that cross-access easement through their property. That property is not under application. They apparently were not interested in that, introducing more traffic through their site, which in some respects is a little bit understandable. That station, if Councillor Wilson's aware of it, has the gas loading bays are sort of a line north-south, so it's something coming east-west across the site may interfere with that. But in any event, as the property wasn't under application, there was really no opportunity to you know, push for that too strenuously. I guess the other observation on this is that as traffic increases, the community grows and develops along these major arterials, and Como Lake is a 4-lane arterial in this area. You know, you start to get to the scale and volume of traffic where it's just not safe to allow those cross movements, those left in and outs, unless it's at an intersection. And I think it's just one of those things that people need to become accustomed to over time, that if you want to go there, you have to plan your route accordingly and go through a signalized intersection that will enable you to make that right into the site or out. It's not a you know, a huge commercial complex, so hopefully it'll be more neighborhood serving, and people either ideally be walking there or you know, coming from the neighborhood and would be familiar with the safe access to the site. So it's it's something you just need to accept as the arterials increase in traffic and the community grows around them. In terms of the parking layout, yeah, I was curious about that myself. I had a look at that and spoke to the file manager. And the way that was explained to me was the site has obviously a certain depth, from Como Lake back to the north property line. And there was a number of requests for widening that the city was seeking, first to enable for a separate boulevard with street trees to be planted, and then the separate sidewalk in behind that, so it's a safer, more comfortable environment for pedestrian traffic, but plus an additional utility corridor. So this additional widening therefore narrowed the rest of the site, and it got it down to, what do you take out next? And the thought had been that given the adjacency to the residential neighborhood to the south, and some of the concerns, frankly, that come up before about the impact on those residents there, it was felt the higher objective was to provide for a decent privacy and screening fence along there with some landscaping, but also for service access across the back of the building. So it took up that portion there. What it meant was, at the end of the day, those 4 or 5 or 6 parking stalls along the front of the building there, just at the minimums for small car spaces, width and depth, and that was the only space that was left over for those that parking.
Is it? Do we need to ask for that much space for the boulevard, the utility strip, the sidewalk? Like, is there any way? I don't want to make the building any smaller, but the last thing I want is for us to create a parking lot that's going to be problematic as well.
My understanding is what the city was seeking along the north side of Como Lake was, the bare minimum that was necessary for that, the boulevard and utility area. It was also pointed out to me, though, that this layout is more functional than others in the area there. So even though those some of the parking stalls are at the minimum size, it was felt that the overall parking layout was still fairly functional.
And if I may, the 3.5 meter dedication is a standard dedication along arterial streets, such as Como Lake, again a high volume street, and those small parking spaces will be clearly labeled. And the aisle width between the 2 banks of parking, between Como, the ones that front Como Lake and the storefront, is consistent with our bylaw, 6.1 meters wide.
Okay. Is there any way to make a left turn lane going eastbound on Como Lake? I know, when you go up Mariner towards the Thrifty Foods, there's a left turn bay into the Thrifty Foods lower parking lot, and then right away there's a left turn bay onto Austin. And it seems like it's almost the same kind of spacing. I think to do that here, you'd have to widen the road a bit, but is that something that was considered?
Perhaps Joseph or Dan can speak to that from an engineering perspective. It probably wouldn't be desirable given the fairly minimal offset to the Poirier intersection.
I thought that about the Mariner one too, but we did.
It may also be that the scale of the development. Again, this is a fairly modest size local serving, whereas the one down at Mariner and Austin, that's a much larger complex.
Right.
Mr. Giuseppe.
Your Worship, technically or physically it would be possible to provide some sort of a flow-through left turn opportunity there, but we believe that this access location is way too close to the intersection, and that would impede, on one hand, the operation, on the other hand, it would have a negative impact on the traffic safety.
Okay, thank you.
There's clarity on that. The element that was described at Thrifty Foods, there was an island there that had the space within the island that could be converted into left turn bay, and it actually wasn't in the original design. It was in a subsequent design after Thrifty Foods opened, and it was largely in response to the, I'm about to say truck route, the realities of trucks coming up Blue Mountain, having to come up Blue Mountain and along Austin, in order to be able to use truck routes to access the only entrance they could get in to Thrifty Foods, which was the right turn off of Mariner. This allowed them to come straight up Mariner, shorten the truck route by about 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers, shorten the distance the trucks were taking on non-truck route arterials. So there was a compromise made simply because it allowed the semi-trailers, it took semi-trailers off the road. So, but it actually wasn't in the engineering's original recommendations for that site. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, my questions are similar to the ones that Councillor Wilson raised. I'm just trying to think back now to when this proposal first came to us. Well, it's come a couple of times, but most recently when it came, we had that discussion about access for left in, and we had the discussion about coming through the Chevron lot. And I'm just trying to think, when it came originally, I know there was never any formal agreements, but I'm just trying to sort of recall what that discussion was in terms of the public hearing, and there was sort of maybe it was just an expectation that they would be able to continue to access there, but maybe you could just refresh my memory as to what exactly, because I don't recall this right in, right out only being part of the first proposal.
Ms. Tiffany.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just in recollection of the public hearing, when this first came forward for first reading, the proposal was evaluated initially based upon right-in and right-out only. I believe it was suggested at the time by some council members of the public hearing to go back and have discussions with Chevron as an additional possibility to provide improved access to the site, but it wasn't directed as an expectation or an outcome in terms of the conclusions of this. The application was evaluated on its own merits in terms of access onto and off of the site and not being dependent upon access through the Chevron site.
Okay, so it was evaluated so the way it's come to us is the way it was originally planned. If they had been able to do it, that would have been a bonus, and there was some discussion that it might help both. There is still a left in to the Chevron from Como Lake, is there not? I'm just trying to remember from here. I know that a lot of people go up and make a left on the Poirier and come in at the side, but I think there's unrestricted into the Chevron, isn't there? I'm looking at this map, but fortunately the arrow, our red marking is right over top of that bay, so I can't tell if there's a left turn lane. There's a left turn lane for Poirier, but does that allow people to actually make a left into the Chevron?
I think whenever I turn left into Chevron, I do so illegally. Ms. Tiffany.
There is a solid yellow line on Poirier Street in the intersection, so technically I believe
You're not supposed to.
they're not supposed to, but whether people do that or not, as the mayor suggested, they probably still do.
My concern is, will the same thing happen here? Are we planning to put pins down the line? Are the driveways going to be configured in such a way that it's not a straight in, that you actually have to be coming from the east to make that turn in? Will there be sort of one of those like triangular islands put in there? I'm just wondering how we're going to differentiate between this right in, right out only, and the one at the gas station next door.
I don't believe anything as of yet has been proposed in terms of a physical barrier along Como Lake to physically prevent the left turn going from eastbound onto that site. It could be as part of the off-site improvements as a suggested way to better manage that access and further clarify that it is right in and right out only.
This, and I suppose it'll be, either way, it's going to be registered against the problem. We've had this discussion around other parking lots in the city, whereas these things have to be done at the development permit stage because you can't go in later and make the changes. So I'm just wondering exactly, now that we're at the development permit stage, do we have specifics on what we will do, as opposed to, is it going to be like that no right turn or no left turn sign is going to go up across the street? I mean, we're going to actually do signage, or because I don't think the yellow paint is going to work.
Your Worship, yeah, in the I think the second or third attachment in the report, it has the overall site layout, And in that, you can see the, yes, that one there, Councillor Hodge. You can see the proposed access to the site. It's at the far southwest corner, so it's about as far as you can get from the Chevron site. And I think it's correct that through that area, as Eric has described, there's it's just a solid yellow line that delineates the center line of the road. And I think then the approach to the left turn bay at Poirier. If this is a real concern of council, and I know it did come up before, we could take this away and have a look at it. We'd work with our colleagues in engineering and transportation planning and look at that proposed driveway access point. Right now it's perpendicular to Como Lake Avenue to facilitate both right in, right out. Can that be modified to allow for what's called a delta to channel the traffic so it's just right in, right out? That might be, yes. That's sort of.
And just further to Jim's comments there, yeah, like when we review those, the development servicing drawings, we'll look to put in a right in, right out feature there in consultation with transportation engineering.
And I note that on this plan, on the attachment that I've got here, that the driveway is just basically straight. And we've had this discussions about driveways in and out of parking lots on arterial roads. That are we better to sort of bank it so that a car can come in while still doing 50 kilometers an hour, because I know nobody down there does more than 50 kilometers an hour, and that they can make the turn in without crossing over onto the outbound lane. And that to me, that again, pulling those boulevards back and curving to have a wider sort of in and out, and then allowing to put that sort of triangle in the middle to prevent the left turns. But I don't want to design this, but I've been constantly told if we don't do it at the development permit, we can't do it later.
Through to Councillor Hodge, we will design it according to best tax standards, best practices. I'm not an engineer, but we'll make sure that the entry speed is less than 50 kilometers. Appropriate speed, of course.
Great, thank you.
I'm glad you caught that, Mr. Johansson. Councillor O'Neill.
Yes, thank you. I've supported this development after the public hearing, and I continue to support it now. We did have some discussion, and I recall that in the May 26th public hearing and then the granting of second and third readings at the ensuing council meeting, that we had in front of us a report from staff that talked about traffic management. And this is on the specific issue of a potential median. And that report said that transportation planning staff have reviewed the application and do not foresee any traffic concerns that would necessitate a median to restrict left turn movements from Como Lake to the site. The proposed local commercial use is not expected to generate significant traffic volumes. Sites zoned C1 local commercial are intended to primarily serve the local community within walking distance of the local commercial use. And my comment, of course, there'll still be a lot of people driving to this place, of course. But anyway, insofar as somebody has suggested that we ask staff, or staff has even volunteered to look at this issue again, I would say, from my point of view, save your time, save your breath. You've already done it, and you've already reached a conclusion on the need for a median or a left-hand turn lane for eastbound traffic wanting to, a little bay for them to eastbound on Como Lake to get into this. Staff has already reviewed the application and saw no need for it. So I'm not in favor of you guys going over and doing the same work again. We had that before us before we approved second and third reading. I don't want you to do the same work that you've already done. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Zerillo.
Thank you. Well, I've certainly been supportive of this development because the site needs to be improved from its current condition, that's for sure. My concern is about the pedestrian movement around there, especially with the site across the street now. That used to be the SD43 site that will block view for kids that are coming over and across. So it's the pedestrian flow that I'm concerned about now, and if people are deking in and out on a left turn, that concerns me because they won't be looking forward at the kids that might be crossing or coming past the houses that are going to be built on the other side. So mine is all about visibility right now. And I think the idea of not being able to left out is almost more important than not being able to left in, because when you're lefting out, you're just gunning it to try to get into traffic. So I do have a concern that we need to look at it again, and I would like to see or know that we've done some engineering, whether it's pins or something, to make sure that you can't left in and you certainly can't left out. I mean, there's just going to be a lot of kids around there, and the visibility is not going to be what it is right now because that lot on the corner of Poirier and Como Lake is going to be built up. My other ask at this point in time is the crosswalk to be repainted. I think we need to really look at that crosswalk and get it highly, highly visible now and get people used to it.
Thank you. I actually have one, it's more of a comment. I was trying to scale off attachment 2, and I realized you've printed a scale, but the scale doesn't apply, of course, anymore. And I'm hopeful that we can try to be mindful of when we're zooming in on a drawing to put NTS or some other notation in place of the 1/8 to the foot. The same thing applies, I think, to the 1 to 1500 on attachment 1, which I'm not sure whether it applies anymore. So just a pet peeve of mine. So thank you. Anybody else? The motion is fourth and final and a DP. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7 is report of General Manager, Engineering and Public Works related to the proposed changes to the Austin Avenue Laurentian Crescent intersection. The recommendation is that Council support the proposed changes to the intersection as developed to date for further refinement and report back. And 2, endorse the planned community consultation process to gauge support for the proposed changes and report back to Council with a recommendation on the next steps.
Second. Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, I'm actually not ready to support the proposed changes. It's kind of like developing a draft neighborhood plan. Well, we support the draft, but we're actually here being asked to support the proposed changes developed today for further refinement. I'm just happier to say, okay, we endorse this, number 2 only. We endorse the plan, a consultation process to gauge support for the proposed changes. So in that way, we're sort of endorsing the proposed changes going forward, but we're not having a separate thing to actually say we support the changes, because we haven't heard from the people in the neighborhood, especially those on Haversley and King Albert, who may be impacted by people coming down Laurentian and not now being able to get out on Austin and taking shortcuts through King Albert and Haversley. So I want to hear from them first before supporting the changes formally. So I'm all for going for number 2, endorse a planned community consultation process to gauge support for the proposed changes, and then reporting back to us with recommendations for next steps. So I move separation on 1 and 2, and
Okay, we don't need a motion. We'll separate them. Councillor O'Neill, you're done?
yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Well, I have to say I'm really happy to see this today. It's one of the things that was on the capital plan last year as well, and I'm very happy to see it because this is an intersection that I use every day, and also my neighbors have been asking me about this for my whole time in office. They've been asking me, when are they going to fix that corner? When are they going to fix that corner? It's very dangerous for pedestrians. It's very dangerous for kids that are driving. I tell my kids, and I know at least half a dozen people on my street tell their kids, don't take that, take Rochester, take the care and come up. So I'm very, very happy to see it. Please tell Mr. Mooney that I'm so happy to see it, and I'll support whatever this council decides to get this thing going quickly.
Thank you. I'll be supporting it as well. This actually has been a challenging intersection, largely because the two sides of Laurentian don't line up. That has been the case. That has always been the barrier, is you can't put in a traffic light when they don't line up. And we had residents up until recently on the north side who were resisting the idea that their side of Laurentian wouldn't connect to Austin. So it was a question of trying to find a compromise that people could support. I'm hopeful that this is the one. It worked on Charland, but that was actually driven by the residents of Charland rather than by City Hall. And at the same time as we hear that this is the worst intersection, it clearly the stats don't bear that out. The stats show it to be worse than a typical collector butting onto an arterial, but not that much worse. And so I think this is the right one to tackle. I think this is hopefully the right solution, and I'm hopeful that the residents in the neighborhood will support it as well. Councillor Hodge.
Yeah, I agree. I think this has been a long-standing issue. I'm troubled by diagonal crosswalks. There's a whole lot of different things going on here. But I had flagged the same thing that Councillor O'Neill has, and that is that why we would support the changes and then go to public consultation. I think that, and so often we hear that, well, you come up to talk to us, but you've already made the decision. So I think if we've already made the decision, we've made the decision, or we want to hear from the residents and then report back to us for a decision. So I'm troubled by the first part, and I don't know that we need that first part in there. I think we can just proceed to 2 and say we've endorsed the consultation process to gauge support, and you're going to report back to council anyway. So I think it's either one or the other.
Councillor Aslinson.
Well, thank you very much. This intersection has some unique characteristics to it. I'll agree with Councillor O'Neill and Councillor Hodge that to support it before we go consultation sort of gives we may want to support it, but we should get the consultation first and move forward. I know myself driving that street, going up to that intersection. I think also in the other part of it, the people on the north side of Laurentian there have complained about Laurentian being a parking lot for events and everything else in their neighborhood, the impact the arena has. So they may be looking forward to the cul-de-sac there, making their neighborhood more quiet. But I want to hear that consultation. I want to hear those comments coming back. So I think I'm going to agree with Councillor O'Neill on the separation. We'll see what the vote happens. But I'll definitely support number 2, going out for the consultation and reporting back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Councillor Wilson.
Thanks. I'm assuming that the staff feel the same way as us, that why commit to an option before public consultation. So I'm just curious as to what the thinking was behind this recommendation.
Your Worship, through the chair, I guess we wanted to get the concept in front of council so that you were aware of what we were looking at. It's a fairly significant change to the road network there, but at the same time, it's one that we believe is the best solution for all concerned, both north and south. Laurentian is a local on the north side, a collector on the south side. Very similar to the Poirier-Charland closure. While it wasn't our intention to put that recommendation forward to handcuff or to imply to the public that this was the solution and take your best shot at it, but rather to seek out council's general endorsement of the concept, and then take that back out to the public, both north and south, and get their feedback, report back to you on any refinements. If we find that it works but it needs some tweaking, we would report that back to you. If it's dead in the water, we would report that back to you. But we felt it was important to share the concept because of its significance in the community and in the network there, and hear from you as to whether you support it in principle or not before going out to the public. If it was a non-starter with council, we didn't want to be going out to the public with something that they endorsed, but you couldn't for some reason.
So while there might be, another option of maybe realigning the road, this is by far the most practical option. It's the one that we all support, and you're quite confident the public will support it.
through the chair, we believe it's the best solution for this particular intersection as we know it. We have had some discussions with residents in the area. A number of them will call us on a regular basis when there is an incident at that location. And we have shared the general concept of eliminating or simplifying the intersection, eliminating the north leg, which is the minor leg, to the intersection with them, and there seems to be general support, but by no means would I want to speak for them to say it's a slam dunk. I think we need to do our consultation, we need to articulate the concept, and then listen very, very carefully.
And so if we approve this the way it's requested, we are not committing ourselves to this particular option. More just this is kind of the preferred solution and you're just getting feedback from the public on it. I'm just trying to understand if we need to separate it or not.
Through the chair, presuming that number 2 is endorsed with or without number 1, we would report back to you before undertaking any commitments to building or to making any changes at that intersection. We are trying to coordinate this work with paving, which is also scheduled for that north leg of the intersection, but that'll occur later this summer, and we're confident with getting it in front of you today and starting a public consultation process that we can make those deadlines.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. I'm not sure whether your comments are related to this, but I worry now that it appears that council may wish to not support the current proposal, but not reject it. I don't think council is going to go into this. Right now, the vote will either be to support or to reject. And I would entertain at some point a motion to defer consideration of number 1 rather than dividing the division. We could defer consideration of number 1, but that's entirely up to council. I'm not able to do that. Councillor O'Neill.
Thank you. I just had an idea that maybe we should defer consideration number 1 until after number. So because number 2, okay. So and Councillor Hodge says he would second that, and I just want to say that in response to comment that I heard from staff, if this were a non-starter, I would not be supporting number 2. But I just think this is. I think it's better I think it's a better process for us to not be to not look like we made up our mind to begin with, especially when there could be some strong public opinion about this. I don't know. I'm just looking at the consequences that might be for especially the people in King Albert and Habersley. I want to have an open mind on this. I think number 2 captures everything here. We endorse a public consultation process for the proposed changes and reporting back to council. So in essence, we're saying, yeah, take these proposed changes out and let's hear what the community hears about them. I don't want to send a message that we're absolutely opposed to this or absolutely in favor of it. So perhaps deferral of number 1 is the way to go. And just number 2, I think, does everything we need to do while respecting the public's right to weigh in and not to think that we've made up our mind before we've even started the process. So you might say this issue is at the intersection of process and product, and we want to have a good process, and ultimately, which will lead to a better product.
And you're moving a traffic signal.
Yes, the red light. Or yellow light, maybe. Red light for the time being on number 1.
Flashing red.
Flashing red.
And it would be deferral to be returned following the public consultation process.
That sounds perfect. Another good idea that I just had.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill and seconded by Councillor Hodge. Discussion on the motion to defer item 1, recommendation 1. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. The question is recommendation 2 to endorse public consultation. Any further discussion? Seeing none. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Feel better about that.
Oops. Item 8 is the Metro Vancouver Board and Brief for February 13th, 2015. The recommendation is that Council receive the brief for information.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen. Second by Councillor Hodge. Councillor O'Neill.
Oh,
Nope.
sorry. My apologies.
Very good. No worries. The other, Councillor Zerlo.
Thank you. I didn't realize Mr. Mooney was in the audience there until just right now. Okay, I had a question just about the tipping fee bylaw at the end there. My question is about the new tipping fees. I'm not sure if this is going to affect our solid waste contract at the city, and I'm just wondering if we could get some feedback or some information on that.
Mr. Diazegi.
Through your worship, yes, indeed, the proposed new bylaw tipping fee by Metro Vancouver will have an impact on the city's solid waste disposal costs. And based on our preliminary calculations, it appears that about half of our loads per truck are over the 9-ton barrier, which yields the least tipping fee at $80 per ton. And the other half of the loads we have is just below 9 tons. So that's going to be also at a somewhat more favorable rate. Overall, we anticipate that the city, assuming the current volumes will persist, the city will save in the order of $70,000, maybe $80,000 per year on tipping fees should this bylaw be implemented.
So is the bylaw, like it says approved here, like these tipping fees are approved, so it's already, the wheels are already in motion that this will happen, these fees will happen, and so our savings are for sure?
Last I heard, the implementation was scheduled for the 1st of April.
If I could just address that, the GVRD board, Metro board, has approved these changes. It remains to be seen as to whether or not additional changes need to be made during the year, and that depends a lot on what the private sector does in response to this. It would not be appropriate at this time to change the rates in our solid waste bylaw, which is coming before council next week, because there is significant uncertainty with respect to exactly how the economics of this bylaw will play out over the next year. And it may well be that Metro will propose more changes sometime later. So I think we're in a safe position. These changes should reduce our costs, but by no means the reaction that Metro will put forward going forward will be solidified for the whole year.
So if we do have reduced costs, this is the first time I've seen this, how do we absorb those, or what does the city do with those? And I know it's hypothetical at the moment, but how do we handle?
We will simply be charged less by Metro, and the balance would reside in our solid waste reserve. If for some reason it went the other way, which we're not anticipating it would, we would have to draw from our reserves. We have set our rates based on generally expected outcomes before this initiative happened. This initiative should reduce our costs, so that puts us in a good position.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you. No further discussion. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Okay. Unanimously, but poorly timed. Okay.
Second.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Asmundson to adjourn. Before we do that, I do want to acknowledge that Wednesday is Pink Shirt Day. There's a lot of members of our community that do participate in that. I've done it 2 days in advance. We believe in safety in our community, particularly safety for our young people. And so those of you who can, please support that. The motion is to adjourn. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. We will now have up to 50 minutes of questions on tonight's agenda. Are there any questions on tonight's agenda from anyone in the audience? Any questions on tonight's agenda? Any questions at all? Seeing none, thank you all for coming.